Hello! If you like stories like this, subscribe to this channel to not miss new videos.
It was raining that night. Not the gentle, lull-you-to-sleep kind of rain, but the cold, needling sort that feels personal, as if the sky is spitting at you. I remember standing by the kitchen window, the smell of overboiled pasta in the air, staring at the driveway. His car was there, parked at an odd angle, headlights still on, slicing through the wet darkness. He was inside, somewhere, but not in here, not with me. I could feel that truth the way you feel the weight of a storm before it breaks. There was a time I would have gone to him, opened the door, tugged his arm, asked what was wrong. But that night, I stayed still, because I already knew. Maybe I'd known for months, even before the lipstick on his shirt, before the unexplained trips, before the money changed everything. The rain kept falling, the pasta boiled over, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid I already had. Before the money, we were fine. Not spectacular, not struggling, just fine. Our life was small, warm, predictable. We lived in a beige, slightly cramped townhouse with a leaky faucet and a neighbor who smoked too close to the window. Dinner was always some variation of chicken or pasta. Saturday mornings meant grocery runs and the comfort of knowing exactly how our days would go. And my husband, Daniel, he wasn't perfect, but he was mine. He laughed at his own bad jokes, always double-checked the locks before bed, and kissed me every morning, even if it was just a brush of lips before coffee. Then came the call. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. His voice was breathless, almost giddy, a tone I'd never heard before. "Claire," he said, "I don't think you're going to believe this. I think I just won something." He had entered some online sweepstakes, the kind you scroll past because they look too good to be true. I'd teased him about wasting time on it, but apparently the universe had decided to make me eat my words. $7 million. Just like that. No work, no struggle, no time to prepare. We didn't sleep that night. We sat on the couch laughing in disbelief, imagining what we could do, the trips we'd take, the debt we'd pay, the little luxuries we'd finally allow ourselves. I remember thinking, maybe this will fix everything we didn't even know was broken. The first signs were so small, I didn't see them for what they were. A new watch, a different brand of cologne, meetings that ran late more often. At first, I told myself he was just adjusting, maybe even trying to impress me. After all, we were suddenly the kind of people who could afford champagne for no reason. Why shouldn't he feel different? But the changes weren't just in what he bought. They were in the way he looked at me. Or rather, the way he didn't. Conversations started feeling half-lived. His eyes would wander, as if I was a commercial break in the middle of a show he couldn't wait to get back to. If the windfall was a stone dropped into the still pond of our marriage, the ripples were subtle at first. Daniel started working later, or that's what he told me. He had decided suddenly to take the money seriously, investing, networking, building something so we wouldn't have to worry about the future. I wanted to be proud of him, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered when he had started using the word I instead of we. The first time I felt the shift was at dinner with his new business friends. We were in a sleek, glass-walled restaurant where the waiters seemed allergic to smiling. Everyone was dressed in black or tailored gray, and I felt like a kindergarten teacher who had wandered into a boardroom by mistake. Daniel was magnetic that night, laughing louder, talking faster, ordering bottles of wine without glancing at the price. At one point, He leaned in close to a tall woman in a crimson dress and whispered something that made her throw her head back in laughter. It was probably nothing, a harmless joke, but my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. When we got home, I asked, "Who was she?" He didn't even look up while unbuttoning his shirt. "Oh, just one of Mark's colleagues. Don't be paranoid, Claire." Paranoid. I tucked that word away. It would come up again. Over the next weeks, his world became shinier. He swapped our reliable sedan for a low, sleek sports car that scraped on every speed bump. He started wearing clothes I'd never seen him in before the money. Crisp shirts that fit just a little too perfectly, shoes that probably cost more than our monthly grocery bill. And me, I tried to keep up. I bought a new dress for the next dinner party, I had my hair done, nails painted, learned to sip wine slowly so I didn't look out of place. But no matter what I did, I could feel the gap widening. He was moving forward at a pace I couldn't match, and I wasn't sure he wanted me to. The late nights grew more frequent. He'd come home smelling faintly of something floral and unfamiliar. "Client dinners," he'd say, dropping his tie on the counter like it had done something wrong. Sometimes he'd shower before kissing me hello. One night, I called him just to hear his voice. The background was loud. Music, laughter, clinking glasses. "Where are you?" I asked. There was a pause. Too long. "Just wrapping up a meeting. I'll be home soon."
He wasn't. Not for hours. The strangest part was that he seemed lighter, happier, but not with me. It was as if he'd stepped into a different life, one that didn't have space for the woman who had folded laundry beside him on the night everything changed. And yet, I stayed quiet, because love, or maybe fear, can make you complicit in your own undoing. The first crack. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic, no shouting, no slammed doors. Just one of those quiet detonations you only realize has gone off after the dust settles. I was in the laundry room, pulling shirts from the dryer, when I found it. A white dress shirt. The fabric fine enough to make me pause. Daniel didn't own shirts like this before the money, but he owned plenty now. I was about to toss it into the basket when I noticed it. A faint smudge of lipstick on the collar. Not pink, not the kind I wore, but a deep wine red. The color of secrets. My first reaction wasn't rage. It was something colder, heavier, the kind of weight that makes it hard to breathe. I ran my thumb over the stain as if maybe it would vanish, as if maybe it was just a trick of the light. But it didn't. It stayed there, a tiny, damning flag waving at me. When he came home that night, I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I was afraid of what he might say. If he lied, I'd have to pretend to believe him. If he told the truth, I wasn't ready for that either. 2 days later, I got my first taste of the second life he was living. I'd gone into his study to grab my phone charger and noticed his laptop open. Daniel was obsessive about logging out of everything, so the fact it was sitting there unlocked felt unusual. I told myself I wasn't going to snoop. I was just going to unplug the charger and leave. But then, a message notification slid into the corner of the screen. Her. Last night was worth every risk. My hands went numb. I clicked, without thinking. A thread of messages spilled open, each one worse than the last. Words I never heard him say to me in years. Plans for hotels, photos, nothing explicit, but close enough. Her name was Alyssa. I didn't read for long. I couldn't. I closed the laptop, put the charger in my pocket, and walked out. That night, he came home smelling like that same floral perfume and kissed me like nothing was wrong. And maybe the strangest thing was that I kissed him back, because if I didn't, the dam would break, and I wasn't ready for the flood. Over the next week, I became an archaeologist of my own marriage, uncovering artifacts of his betrayal, a receipt for a dinner I hadn't been invited to, a hotel charge from a night he claimed to be in meetings, a small gift-wrapped box tucked into his briefcase that was never given to me. It was a peculiar kind of agony, knowing and not knowing. I felt like I was holding my breath all the time, waiting for the inevitable, the moment when he'd either confess or leave. But Daniel, in his new, polished, charming skin, seemed perfectly content to live in both worlds. And I realized something that made my stomach turn. Maybe he wasn't planning to choose. It was supposed to be a simple errand. Daniel had asked me to drop off a folder at his new downtown office, contracts he'd forgotten on the kitchen counter. Normally, I would have left it with the receptionist and gone home. But that day, the receptionist was nowhere to be found, and the elevator doors were already open. I told myself I wasn't snooping. I was just being helpful. The hallway smelled faintly of expensive coffee and polished wood. His office door was ajar. I knocked softly and stepped inside. And there she was.
Sitting on the edge of Daniel's desk, legs crossed like she belonged there, was the woman from the crimson dress, Alyssa. Up close, she was almost unreal, the kind of beauty you don't notice right away because you think it must be airbrushed. She wore a silk blouse that shimmered when she moved, and her laugh, oh God, her laugh, was the same one I'd heard across that restaurant table weeks ago. Daniel was leaning against the desk, far too close, smiling in that way men do when they've decided to be charming. They both turned toward me at the same time. "Claire," he said, like he just remembered my existence. "What are you doing here?" I held up the folder. "You forgot these." Alyssa slid off the desk, her smile polite but distant. "I'll give you two a moment," she said, gliding past me toward the door. Her perfume was the same floral note I'd been smelling on Daniel for weeks. It clung to me, even after she was gone. He took the folder, barely meeting my eyes. "You could have just left it downstairs." I rang the bell. No one was there. "Right." He cleared his throat, shuffling papers that didn't need shuffling. "We're in the middle of something here. We'll talk later, okay?" I wanted to ask what exactly you were in the middle of. I wanted to scream, "Do you even realize how obvious you are?" But my voice felt locked somewhere deep in my chest. So I just said, "Of course," and walked out. That night, I waited. Waited for him to bring it up, to explain, to lie, anything. But he didn't. He came home late, showered, poured himself a drink, and sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone as if the day had been entirely unremarkable. I watched him. Really watched him. The line of his jaw, the way he smirked at whatever was on the screen, the faint shadow of a man I used to know, replaced now by someone who could stand in a room with me and still be miles away. And I realized he wasn't afraid of being caught. He was certain I wouldn't leave. I told myself I could live with it, not forever, just for now. Long enough to figure out what I wanted, what I could survive. Long enough to see if the man I married was still buried somewhere under the tailored suits and the new cologne. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of the silence that would follow if I said the words out loud.
Afraid of the way his absence might feel if it became permanent. Afraid of finding out once and for all that I was no longer enough. The first time I tried to bring it up, we were in the kitchen. He was opening a bottle of wine. I was chopping vegetables I no longer wanted to eat. I asked him, "Who was that woman in your office?" Keeping my tone light, as though I'd forgotten her name. His hands stilled for a fraction of a second before the cork popped. "Alyssa. She's a consultant. She's helping us with a new deal." "That's all?" I pressed. He poured the wine, sliding a glass toward me without looking up. "Yes, Claire, that's all. Can we not do this? Not, can we talk about it? Not, why are you asking? Just, can we not?" And just like that, the conversation was over. I started noticing other things. The way he guarded his phone now, never leaving it on the counter. The way he'd step outside to take calls, his voice dropping into that low, warm register he used to save for me. The way he seemed almost irritated when I made plans for us, as if my attempts at closeness were inconveniences. One night, he came home smelling faintly of smoke and perfume. His tie loose, hair mussed in a way that wasn't wind. I wanted to ask, "Where were you?" But the words stayed trapped. Instead, I set his dinner in front of him and pretended not to notice when he barely touched it. I told myself maybe I was wrong. That maybe the lipstick, the messages, the office scene, maybe they weren't what they looked like. Maybe the story I was telling myself was just fear twisting the truth. After all, I loved him. And love can be the cruelest storyteller. But love also has a way of keeping score even when you don't want it to. I started waking up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding for no reason. Sometimes I'd roll over and find his side of the bed cold. Other times, I'd lie there listening to his steady breathing, wondering if he was dreaming of me or of her. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the slow erosion of who I was. I caught myself rehearsing conversations in my head, bargaining with a future that didn't even exist yet. I wondered if I could be the kind of wife who looks the other way, who trades self-respect for the comfort of shared history. I hated that I was even considering it.
The discovery. It was raining again, the kind of rain that makes the whole city feel blurred at the edges, headlights smearing across wet asphalt. Daniel had told me he'd be home late, another business dinner. By now, those words landed in my stomach like stones. I was curled on the couch, half watching a movie I'd already seen, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. You don't know me, but you deserve to know the truth. Attached was a photo. It took me a moment to process what I was looking at. The image was grainy, probably taken on a phone from across the room, but there was no mistaking them. Daniel and Alyssa, seated at a corner table in some dimly lit bar, her hand was on his thigh, his face tilted toward hers, lips dangerously close to meeting. The timestamp was that night. My chest went tight like someone had looped a rope around it and pulled. I scrolled down. There were more photos. Them leaving together. Him holding the door of his car for her. Her laughing at something he said, touching his arm like it belonged to her. The final image? Them stepping into a hotel lobby. I didn't reply to the number. I didn't need to. Whoever sent it had already detonated my reality. I sat there for what felt like hours, the phone heavy in my hand. My mind was a slideshow of every moment I doubted myself, every excuse I swallowed whole. The lipstick, the messages, the late nights. All of it undeniable now. When I finally moved, it wasn't to cry. It was to gather evidence. I printed the photos, pulled bank statements, dug up the hotel charge I'd seen weeks ago.
I built a file. Neat, clinical, like I was preparing for a trial. In a way, I was. He came home past midnight, hair damp from the rain, humming to himself as he hung his coat. He didn't notice the papers spread on the kitchen table until he was halfway to the fridge. "What's this?" he asked, his voice too casual. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, I saw not the man I married, but the stranger he had become. His eyes flicked over the photos, the receipts. For a split second, something like panic flashed across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by a cold, practiced calm. "You've been going through my things?" he said. That was what he chose. Not "I'm sorry," not "let me explain," just accusation. Something inside me cracked then. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet final break. "Go to bed, Daniel. We'll talk in the morning." But we both knew there wasn't going to be a morning worth talking about. I didn't sleep. The rain stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the world heavy and damp. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, staring at the stack of evidence as if it might rearrange itself into a different truth. Daniel came downstairs just after 7, hair damp from the shower, dressed for another day in his gleaming new life. He poured himself coffee without a word. I let him take the first sip before I spoke. "We need to talk." His jaw flexed almost imperceptibly. "About what?" I slid the file toward him. "About her." He didn't open it, just stared at me, eyes narrowed. "Claire, this is—" "Don't," I cut in. My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling. "Don't tell me it's not what it looks like. Don't tell me she's just a colleague. I'm done pretending I aren't see what's right in front of me." He leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a puzzle he wasn't sure was worth solving. "You've been keeping tabs on me? Printing pictures? That's obsessive." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that startled even me. Obsessive is sleeping next to someone every night while they're sneaking off to hotels with someone else. His gaze slid away toward the window. "You think you know everything, but you don't. Things have been off between us for a long time. Maybe this wouldn't have happened if—" "Stop." My voice cracked then, but I didn't care. "You don't get to make this about me. You made a choice, Daniel. You took our life, our marriage, and you traded it for whatever this is." For a moment, the mask slipped. Guilt flickered across his face, quickly smothered by defensiveness. "People change, Claire. Money changes things. I'm not the same man I was." "That's the problem," I whispered. We sat there in silence, the only sound the ticking of the kitchen clock. I realized then that I wasn't going to get an apology, not the kind that mattered. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done, only sorry I'd found out. Finally, I pushed back my chair. "I want you out. Today." His eyes widened. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack." He studied me for a long moment, maybe expecting me to back down, but I didn't. Eventually, he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smirk tugging at his lips, the look of a man who thought he'd be back. When he left with a hastily packed bag, I didn't cry, not then, not even when the door clicked shut behind him. The tears came later in the quiet hours of the afternoon, when I realized that the man I'd loved for so many years had been gone for a long time. I'd just been too afraid to admit it. The first thing I noticed after he left was the silence.
Not the peaceful kind, but the thick, oppressive quiet that seems to seep into your bones. No sound of his keys clattering into the bowl by the door, no muffled voice drifting from the study, just the steady hum of the refrigerator and my own uneven breathing. I told myself I would use the time alone to think, to figure out my next steps. But the truth is, for days, I just drifted. I made coffee I barely drank. I stared at the TV without following the plot. I found his shirt still hanging in the closet, his scent clinging to the fabric, and had to walk out of the room before I broke apart completely. The world didn't give me much time to grieve in private. By the end of the week, people knew. Neighbors, friends, even my hairdresser. All of them offering their own brand of sympathy. The worst were the ones who whispered, "I heard he's with someone else." As if I didn't already know. As if the words weren't still burning holes in my chest. The financial side came next. $7 million had looked like a lifeline once, but it was his name on most of the accounts. He moved fast, faster than I could. Suddenly, the joint credit card was frozen, the bank account drained to a fraction of what it had been. My lawyer told me not to worry, that a divorce settlement would sort things out. But all I could think was, he's cutting me out before I can even stand up. And then there was the public humiliation. I didn't see him with her for the first few weeks, but the photos found their way to me anyway. Friends sent them, sometimes with a disclaimer, "I thought you should know," and sometimes without a word. Daniel and Alyssa at a charity gala. Daniel and Alyssa stepping off a yacht. Daniel and Alyssa in the gossip column, labeled as the city's newest power couple. I stopped going to places we used to frequent. I couldn't bear the thought of running into them, of seeing the pity in someone's eyes as they glanced from me to her. The woman, who had replaced me, fit his new life perfectly. Sleek, polished, and untouched by the years we'd spent paying bills and fixing leaky faucets. One night, after too many glasses of wine, I found myself scrolling through our old photos. Beach trips, Christmas mornings, lazy Sundays on the couch. His smile in those pictures was so open, so unguarded. It was almost impossible to believe it belonged to the same man who had looked me in the eye and blamed me for his betrayal. Somewhere in the haze of grief and anger, a thought began to take shape. Maybe losing him wasn't the worst thing that could happen to me. Maybe staying with the stranger he'd become would have been worse. Independence. It started with the bed. One morning, I stripped it down to the mattress. Sheets, pillows, comforter. All of it went into a donation bag. The scent of him was gone from the room in a single afternoon, replaced by crisp linen that smelled faintly of lavender. It was such a small thing, but that night, for the first time since he left, I slept without waking in the dark, reaching for someone who wasn't there. From there, I kept going. I cleared his side of the closet. I boxed up the books he'd bought but never read. I took down the framed photo from our wedding day and replaced it with one of my sister and me laughing at the beach. It wasn't erasing him. It was reclaiming the space he'd once filled. The first time I went out alone, it felt strange, almost transgressive. I chose a little cafe downtown I'd never been to before, somewhere without memories. I sat by the window, ordered my own coffee, and lingered over a novel. No one looked at me with pity. No one asked where Daniel was. For an hour, I was just another woman in the city, not someone's abandoned wife. Of course, there were setbacks. Some nights, the loneliness hit like a punch to the chest. I'd think about all the versions of our life I'd imagined before the money. The trips we would have taken,
the children we might have had. It was like grieving not just for him, but for an entire future that had evaporated. But there were good days too. Days when I'd wake up and realize I hadn't thought about him until late afternoon. Days when I laughed, genuinely laughed, with friends without the weight of betrayal hanging over every word. The divorce proceedings dragged on, as they always do. My lawyer was optimistic. Daniel's lawyer was ruthless. I learned quickly that charm and lies worked just as well in a courtroom as they do in a marriage. But for every trick they tried, I fought back. I had my evidence, my dates, my receipts. And I had the one thing they couldn't fabricate: the truth. By the time the papers were signed, I had more than enough to start over. Not 7 million, but enough. Enough to keep the lights on, to buy my own car, to travel if I wanted. Enough to know I didn't need him to survive. The last time I saw Daniel was at the final meeting to sign the settlement. He looked different, thinner somehow, tired in a way money couldn't hide. Alyssa was waiting for him in the lobby, scrolling through her phone. He didn't look at me the way he used to, not even in anger. Just a polite, empty glance, as if I were an old coworker he barely remembered. It hurt, yes, but it also made something inside me settle. I wasn't his anymore, and he wasn't mine.
3 years later. It's funny how life rearranges itself when you're not looking. 3 years ago, I couldn't imagine a day without Daniel's shadow hanging over me. Now, most days, I go hours, sometimes an entire afternoon, before I even remember he exists. I live in a small house now, just a short walk from the ocean. It's nothing like the glossy penthouse Daniel once talked about buying. The walls are painted soft, sunlit colors. There's sand in the entryway more often than not, and the kitchen smells faintly of coffee and fresh bread. I work part-time at a local bookstore, not because I need to, the settlement took care of that, but because I like it. People tell me I seem lighter. Maybe I am. I first heard about Daniel again through a mutual acquaintance. We were both at the same charity event, though I didn't see him until the end. The whispers reached me before he did. He's not with her anymore. Elisa? That ended months ago. Something about the money. Investments gone wrong. When I finally caught sight of him across the room, he looked smaller somehow. Still well-dressed, still charming on the surface, but the confidence was thinner, like a coat worn through at the elbows. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. For a brief, startling moment, I remembered the man I'd married, the one who used to kiss me good morning and double-check the locks. Then the memory passed, leaving only the stranger he became. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. I walked out into the cool night air, the sound of the ocean somewhere in the distance. The breeze carried the scent of salt and something else, something like freedom. And as I made my way home, I realized something I wished I could go back and tell the woman I was on that rainy night years ago. Sometimes losing everything you thought you needed is the only way to find yourself.